Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling in from. It is wonderful to see people begin to trickle into the call. While we are waiting for more people to come, I thought it'd be great if you could leave a quick message in the chat to say what country you're dialing in from. And also, if you don't have your name within your profile on Zoom, add your name, please, and your organization next to it as well, so that we know who everyone is. That would be great. Okay, so we've got Armenia, Bangladesh. I'm calling in from the UK. I always love to see how international YBI is, how we get people from really all over the world involved. Kenya, another UK, Austria. This is great. Okay, and in the meantime, I am going to begin sharing my screen. And if you could just give me a little nod or a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. You can see my screen. All right, well, I'm sure we'll have people kind of continuing to trickle in over the next few minutes, but let me kick off. So welcome to the second session of YBI's Social and Green Month 2023. We've got 4 sessions in total happening this month. We had our last session last week, which was very exciting. And actually, another thing I'm going to ask you to do once you've written the country that you're dialing in from is, can you put either yes or no into the chat, depending on whether you attended last week's session or not. So if you attended last week's session, type in yes. And if you did not attend, then type in no. Okay, so we've got a few no's. We've got a few yeses. All right, so I am going to do a bit of a introduction to this. I'm not going to go into too much detail, especially for those who have attended already. I think I'll do a brief overview, but keep it relatively brief so that we can get into the real meat of the conversation and our panel as quickly as possible. So I think most of you are familiar with YBI. For those of you who have really just learned about YBI recently, we are a network of organizations around the world that all support young entrepreneurs. So really our members, member organizations based really geographically globally, all provide direct support to young entrepreneurs. It could be through capacity building, mentoring, training, also providing finance. There's a whole kind of variety of different models of support. And that is why this topic that we're going to be looking at today is particularly interesting, I believe. Okay, so this is a little snapshot of where our members are based. So as I mentioned, it is very kind of geographically spread. We have members who support kind of young entrepreneurs in very different contexts. We did some research last year which showed us that around 50% of our members provide specific support to social and green entrepreneurs, and just under 50% provide or want to provide social and green entrepreneurs support within kind of the near future. And it was only a very small proportion of our members who have no plans to be providing specific support to young social and green entrepreneurs at all. So we really know that this is a topic that is becoming more and more important for all of our members around the world, I think reflecting the growing global consciousness of needing to have business that is really aiming to solve some key kind of social and environmental challenges while they generate profit. So a snapshot of YBI's approach more generally to supporting young entrepreneurs. So really there are 3 key areas, 3 key pillars of support that YBI provides. One is around personal development. So this is looking at leadership development, looking at what can sometimes be called soft skills development, but we learned from the last session that actually shouldn't be called soft. There's nothing soft about them. Looking at resilience, confidence, communication, looking at mindset as well. So the first session last week really focused in on personal development specifically of social and green entrepreneurs. Some really interesting insights came out of that. What I can do is share the recording of that session for anyone who's interested, but really it showed us that leadership in particular is key to the kind of to the success of any social and green enterprise. This session will be focusing on business development. So looking at those, quote, hard skills of entrepreneurship, looking at finance, looking at legal, governance. Also, of course, this is focusing on social and green entrepreneurship. So there's also a piece around impact measurement. How do you really define, measure, and communicate what your impact is as a social or green entrepreneur? And then the next session that will be taking place next Tuesday looks at environmental facilitation. So this is how do we develop ecosystems that really enable young social and green entrepreneurs to thrive? So what are the support structures that need to be in place for that to happen? You know, what are the different organizations that should be working together, and how can we make it all a bit more joined up? Finally, the fourth session will take place on the 27th, so that's next Thursday. We'll really kind of tie all of this together. So we would love it if as many of you would be at as many of those sessions as possible. So just a brief kind of snapshot of social and green entrepreneurship. I'm pretty sure that most of you on the call will have a roughly good idea already, given that you're here. But just to clarify, make sure we're all on the same page. So social and green enterprises are businesses that are developed to tackle a social or environmental challenge. So really it's at the core of the business. It's the reason for the business existing is in order to be able to solve an environmental or social challenge. So really all the business activities are driven by its impact mission. And I think, again, this is why a lot of the topics that will come up today are so key. A really quite exciting thing about social and green business is that it has the potential to be financially sustainable in a way that charities don't so much, because charities tend to rely on external donations, which are somewhat out of their control. Social and green enterprises aiming to generate their own income and therefore to be financially sustainable and therefore to be able to create a long-term impact. We're by no means saying that social and green enterprise is the kind of only way that you know, we should tackle the world's big challenges, but it's certainly an important piece in the puzzle. And another thing which tends to set social and green enterprises apart from you know, other mechanisms for tackling some of the world's big challenges is that often the leaders are very locally rooted in their communities. They're best placed to understand the problem they're trying to tackle and therefore to design an effective solution. Just briefly to touch on YBI's support for social and green entrepreneurs so far. So really this is kind of kicked off and intensified in the last year and a half or so. So we did some research, we worked very closely with our members, and we set out a social and green positioning paper, which really sort of sets out YBI's plan and agenda and kind of where we are for social and green going forward. We started our Social and Green Month last year, which will be an annual event going forward. Through that, we ran a whole series of regional workshops as well as global workshops. We gathered lots of insights from our members around where they're at with social and green enterprise, what their priorities are, what their big needs and gaps are. And certainly something that came out very strongly was around having great resources and kind of skills development around kind of entrepreneurship and business development for social and green entrepreneurship. as a response to that, we've developed our Social and Green Toolkit, which is in our second iteration now. So it's really a series of practical tools and guidance that takes entrepreneurs on the journey of developing a social or green enterprise. We will be running a in-depth, quite widespread pilot of that toolkit over the next 6 or 9 months. And then we also started a community of practice. So this was for our members who were particularly engaged and kind of excited in social and green to come together and learn and share challenges and set direction. Okay, so in terms of Social and Green Month, as I mentioned, it kicked off last year. So this is our second annual Social and Green Month happening now. Really, the kind of broad goals are that we want you to be able to meet like-minded people who are working to develop social and green entrepreneurship in some capacity. With this month, we're trying to be really outward facing. So we're not just keeping it within the YBI membership. We're really looking to kind of lots of different organizations working globally, funders, kind of impact experts, other conveners who are all playing a really key role in creating that ecosystem. So partly it's to really connect you to hear from entrepreneurs and experts, to explore some of the key challenges facing social and green entrepreneurs, and then to help shape a way forward. So, you know, what will YBI doing over the next couple of years to be able to add as much value as possible so that you can best support the social and green entrepreneurs that you work with. Right, so this is a question I asked last week, and I'm going to just ask it again today so that we get to know a bit more about who's on the call. So if you could just type in the chat, one, if you are a green or social entrepreneur, type that. Or if you are somebody who directly supports social or green entrepreneurs, please tell us. You could be a mentor, you could be a funder, you could be a trainer, so if you could just type in what you are, that would be great. Or it might be that you're not directly working with social and green entrepreneurs at all, but it's an area of interest and you're here to learn more, etc. There may be some of you that are 2 or even all 3 of these, so feel free to identify yourselves as such if that's the case. I'm just going to have a little look at the chat to see what we've got. Okay, so we've got quite a few supporters. We've got a couple of green and social entrepreneurs coming through, interested. I'm a social enterprise champion for our Centre for Entrepreneurship, so a supporter, love that. Okay, so we've got lots of supporters, quite a few entrepreneurs and a few interested people as well. Okay, excellent, quite a good mix there. Right. So before we go on to the panel discussion, which is really kind of the main significant part of this, hearing from experts, I want to hear from you. What would you like to get from the session? So there was a reason why you joined today. What was the main reason? What would you like to get from this? And if there's an area when it comes to business development for social and green entrepreneurs, is there an area that's your biggest priority? And I guess this would be particularly relevant to either social or green entrepreneurs or supporters on the call. It would be great to get an initial kind of sense of what some of your interests are and what your priorities are. So I'll just give you a minute to offer your insight on that. Oops, jumping ahead. So it might be that you've come because you want to learn. It might be that you've come because you want to connect with others or share what you're doing yourselves. So looking to learn more so that the organization is well positioned to be a true supporter of the operators in the space. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Finding things to engage and inspire our students. Okay, it's nice to have you here, Rachel, from a university as well. It's really good to have lots of kind of diversity within our call, because obviously educators are a really key stakeholder within this whole ecosystem, you know, getting people developing an interest in skills and expertise from an early stage, from school, really through university and longer, is really important. Okay, Rashid says, getting to know different perspectives on social and green, especially in the areas of impact investment, impact management. Sarwa, connect to the investors and know more from people around the globe in agri-tech sector. Excellent. Business development, how to achieve growth and run sustainable enterprise. Also investors' readiness and fundraising. I'm just going to give you a few more seconds to do this. Well, you can keep adding your comments. Actually, I'm just going to leave it about 10 more seconds in case any more come in for me to read out. And then we will jump straight into the next part of this session. Okay, I'm gonna jump forward then, but do feel free to keep writing your comments in. It's great to hear from you. Okay, so we have some really exciting speakers who will be sharing their expertise and taking part in our virtual panel discussion today, and I'm so delighted to have them all here. They will each be introducing themselves briefly in a moment, but I'll just quickly run through who we have. So myself, so I'm Anna Hojnicka, I'll be moderating. I am the social and green entrepreneurship lead at YBI, come from a social entrepreneur background myself. We've got Amelia Hopkins Phillips of SOMO, Anna Yanosev from Social Impact Award, Sarwa Kabir from Greenery Cart, Rashid Mamun from BIA, Ellen Martin from Sojo, and Chukwudi Ofili from Renew Capital. So a real kind of diverse mix of people, both in terms of the types of organizations that they are coming from. We have obviously Sarwa as a young social and green entrepreneur himself. We then have supporters, people who are directly supporting, working with young social and green entrepreneurs. We then have somebody who comes from an impact investment background. So yeah, should be really, really interesting. So let me stop sharing my screen now. And I think the speakers are being pinned, so hopefully you'll be able to see us all throughout this discussion. What I'm going to do to kick this off is ask each of the speakers to just give the listeners today a brief introduction to yourself. So we'll just have a maximum of kind of 2 minutes per speaker to share who you are, what organization you're calling in from, and really what you do that's relevant to business development for social and green entrepreneurs. So I'm going to hand over to Amelia, who is first on my screen.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. Great to be online with you all today. I'm, as Anna said, Amelia from SOMO, and we work with micro and small businesses in East Africa, providing them with the financing and training and BDS provisions they need to be able to launch and grow. And specifically with social and green businesses, since kind of our inception, we've had a focus on businesses that are being started to address a need that they are seeing in their communities coming from low-income areas around East Africa. So excited to be on with all of you and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Amelia. And Rashid is next on my screen.
Thank you, Anna. I'm really excited to be here. So this is Rashid. I lead Bangladesh Youth Enterprise Advice and Help Center based in Bangladesh. We support underserved young entrepreneurs coming from all parts of the country to start and scale their business. We give different sets of support, starting from business consultancy, full stack digital support, and as well as business development support. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this session.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Okay, and I have Anna next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. Anna from Social Impact Award. What we do is we empower youth to transform society through impact-driven entrepreneurial journey in our international community. So we kind of offer a full year-long program where young people just entering and curious about the world of social entrepreneurship can go pretty much from a good intention to a functioning social venture on the ground. And we do this in 18 countries throughout Europe, Central Asia, and Africa. excited to be part of this conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. And Trudy.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Trudy Ofili. I'm the Director of Legal for Africa, and I also double as the Investment Manager for West Africa at Renew Capital. So Renew Capital is an impact investment firm registered in the US, but focused on investments in Africa, across Africa. We originally started in East Africa, and we've now expanded into other parts of Africa, including West Africa. So my background is in law. I'm licensed to practice law in Nigeria, as well as in New York. So I straddle across both jurisdictions. Pleasure to join the conversation and share from my experience from the investors' side.
Perfect. Thank you, Trudy. Ellen, you go next, please.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name's Ellen Martin. I run an organization called Sojo. We're on a mission to unlock the potential of the next generation of social entrepreneurs. And we do that. We're a consultancy that actually works with entrepreneur support organizations, like many of you are from, primarily youth serving organizations. And we help those organizations build their capacity to design and deliver social entrepreneurship programs to their communities. We work with a lot of folks who have not previously been involved in supporting social and green entrepreneurs, and then helping them kind of make that transition. So really relevant to the conversation today, and very happy to be here.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, and last but not least, Sawa. Oh, so are you able to unmute?
I'm very sorry. Hello everyone again. I am Sarah Kabir. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm the CEO of Greenery Card. Actually, this is a brand that works the end-to-end supply chain process for agricultural products. Actually, we target to collecting the harvest directly from the contracted farmers and bringing fresh and organic vegetables to the end customers, and as well as enabling the minority and non-privileged community as the retailers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sawa. And if you're able to, it would be great to have the camera on, but don't worry if the internet is tricky. Also, it's nice to see your background. I see some fresh air that you're in.
At my farm right now.
Oh, you're at the farm. Excellent. So we actually have coming in live from the scene. That's great. Well, Sawa, why don't we actually kick off with you as our young social and green entrepreneur? My first question is to you, and I'd like you to think back to when you started on your entrepreneurship journey. So you've been going for a few years now. Based on what you've learned about the experience that you've gained up until now, what piece of advice would you give yourself when you were starting out? So what do you know now that you wish you'd known then, when it comes specifically to kind of business development?
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you for the question. I would say the major learnings is the connectivity to the people with the who works in the same area like me and my organization, Greenery Card, and also the how to make an entrepreneurship journey as impact investment journey. And also I have been through the mentorship from B4B, Bridge for Billions. And from there, I got tremendous mentorship, and that helped and shape my thought process and my business viability. And also, I get to know the economical viability of my business in my actually operational area.
Nice. Okay, so mentoring has been a really key part of your development then over the last few years. Great. Okay, and maybe that moves on to the next question, which I'm going to ask Amelia. you provide lots of different types of support to social and green entrepreneurs at SOMO. What is the support that you've provided that you think has the most impact? It could be on kind of capacity building, a particular area. It could be mentoring, coaching, access to finance. When you look back at kind of what's been really effective in the kind of development of social and green entrepreneurs, particularly relating to their business, what's been kind of particularly effective?
Yeah, so maybe to back up first, working in the communities that we work in, we specifically focus on entrepreneurs coming from marginalized backgrounds. So we work in your informal urban areas, and we work in low-income rural areas as well. And a lot of the cases with the businesses our entrepreneurs are starting or already have started, they already are addressing a social or green issue in their area. They're providing employment to individuals that otherwise would have low rates of employment opportunities, or they are using waste to be able to make a new product. And so it's naturally within their business model, often having that social or green component. What they often don't have is the language around, this is what I'm doing to be able to communicate with the rest of the world that they are these social and green businesses. And so often that's the first starting point of how do you communicate effectively what you are doing and be able to bring on partners from areas external to where you are currently operating your business. How do you sell your products in an effective way? How do you bring on investors? So that's a lot of where we start with entrepreneurs, is just that communication bit. The actual social and green component is often where they're actually starting their business from.
Nice, thank you. I'm going to move over to Chudi. So obviously, like you mentioned, you're coming to this discussion from an impact investor perspective. So when you're looking at all of these different businesses that approach you for investment, for support, what is it that makes you particularly excited about a specific social or green enterprise? What leads you to believe that, you know, they will last the distance?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And so for us, right, one of the first things we look at is the leadership for the enterprise, right? Who are the leaders? What experience do they have? Have they run a business before? You know, where are they located? Of course, they must be, you know, closer to where they're trying to make the impact, right? They must understand the local circumstances, right, in the area. So for us, you know, leaders and the vision of the leaders, very critical for us. We also look at the business model, right? Is it sustainable? Is it diversifiable? What are the opportunities to scale, right? Because again, to make the desired impact, there must be that opportunity to scale, right? It can't just continue to be localized, right? Because for us, we believe that for every social or green enterprise, it has a triple bottom line, right? Which means it must be able to solve social, financial, and environmental challenges, right? And to be honest, the only way it can actually do that if it remains profitable, right? It's not just a charity case, so to speak, right? Because you definitely do need money, right? And the investors also want some sort of return in as much as you're making all of that impact. And more importantly, we look at businesses that can add value or continue to add value, right? So beyond what you start with, right, in terms of your products, it's also not enough to have reached product market fit. But you must also be an entrepreneur who has opportunity to continue to add value. So beyond your initial products, right, it must be something that can notice some other changes or impacts that you can make as add-on to what you already do, right? Because that also makes you more attractive to other investors, right? So beyond just looking at what you're doing today is what potential do you have, and potential also attracts other investors so that you can also scale.
Yeah, that speaks to something you said before about adaptability and having, some flexibility within your business model that shows how you can pivot and how you can evolve. And just to follow up, obviously as an impact investor, you're looking at both having a return on the financial investment, but also you are looking at that social and environmental impact. How do you weigh those two areas up against each other? Is that something that's challenging when making investment decisions? How to kind of prioritize, or how do you tend to kind of make your decision when you're factoring in these very different types of kind of returns that investors are looking for?
Yeah, to be honest, it's never easy, right, to find that sweet spot or to find an equilibrium, to be honest. But what's important for us is that in as much as there's a social impact, right, or there's an environmental impact to be had, there's still some sort of traction, right? Because we believe as an investor, right, that the private sector and profit is actually one of the best ways to build the local economy, right? So in as much as you have these things that you're looking to do in terms of impact, we also want to see some level of traction. That being said, the traction that we might be looking at might not be as, the requirement might not be as stringent as another enterprise that is not within the social or green space, right? Because we definitely do understand that for most of these businesses, they actually do require a lot of capital, right, at the very beginning. And then it does take some time for you to actually begin to see that traction, for you to actually become profitable. So it's like a balancing act, right? And that's why I keep saying that a lot of times we actually do follow leadership, right? Their experience, what vision do they have? Do they have the capacity to drive a business? All of those things actually do weigh on our minds when we make that decision. But it definitely does help to have some level of traction to convince us as investors that beyond the impact, there can be some revenue generation so that other investors would also be sold on your idea, and then they can invest in you, and then you can scale.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. I think sometimes there's a misconception that social and green can kind of be in conflict with profit, or the two things don't go together somehow. But actually, if you have your impact mission kind of built within your business, then the more that you generate profit, the more that you're kind of financially strong, should increase your impact as well. And that leads to me to my next question to Anna, really looking at the kind of social impact side. Obviously, when you're measuring profit, when you're measuring the finances of an organization, it's quite clear. You can look at the numbers, but it can be much more challenging to measure the strength of the social or the environmental impact that you're having. So do you have any advice for social or green entrepreneurs kind of just starting out around how they could think about beginning to measure the social impact they're aiming to have?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it will also pay off later if you start early. To measure your impact can also help you with getting impact investors on board. But I would definitely suggest a few things kind of to demystify, I would say. On one hand, there is a plethora of tools, ways to measure impact, right? And it can be a bit scary, right? I think there are now over 200 methodologies existing out there. So it can be quite scary for starting entrepreneurs, for those that are willing to start measuring their impact, like where do I start, right? So I think this is first a normal fear. Be aware of it, that it's a normal fear. And I would suggest always to start simple, right? Start by kind of defining a bit what is the impact, intended impact, and maybe the unintended impact that you are creating, right? So look at what would be your, big vision idea, and try breaking it down step by step, maybe for even different stakeholders or different products or whatever it is that you're doing, and try to kind of create a bit of a value chain, impact value chain, so to say. Just having this at the beginning is an amazing step, right? And then from there, it's going to be easier to define, okay, what can I actually from here measure, right? And measurement here, I'm thinking either qualitative or quantitative measuring, right? You maybe do in-depth interviews, conversations? Do you maybe do some surveys or some deeper analysis, right? This is something you have to see from what you have the resources to do, especially as a starting entrepreneur. This is usually the case where you don't either know nor have the knowledge within the organization how to actually do it. But if you start small and at least start tracking your outputs, and then you will slowly move further down the chain as you get more capacity in the organization, more time, more people, and so on. And then the second, I would say, advice would be talk to people, right? There are people out there who know. There are organizations, I mean, in this call, you have, what, 6, 7 of us that are kind of working in this field. I'm pretty sure a lot of us, or all of us, would be happy to share a bit the experiences, the tools, the knowledge that we have. Talk to universities, especially if there are some social entrepreneurship centers. Often researchers are very helpful to kind of tell you a bit about different ways you can do this, maybe even support you in the process. So you don't have to go through it always alone, right? So this would be kind of, I would say, my second big advice. And the third, as I said, start measuring from the beginning. Whatever you can, start tracking it. It's going to be so much helpful down the line when you look at, 3 years back and say, 3 years ago, we had, 100 participants in our services, and now we have 1,000. Obviously, something happened there, right? And maybe that's not the best indicator, but it gives you a bit of a, flavor. Okay, how we're growing, or we're managing to reach more people, and then look at how can you expand that knowledge to go not just into the simple, output. This is what we've done, but also look at what impact has that made in the long run, right? So I would say these would be the few beginning steps in the process.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. So if I've heard correctly, so number one is setting that vision and kind of letting the vision of your impact kind of goal really influence all of your activities and be able to sort of drive your kind of business forward through looking at your vision. 2 is talking to lots of people, trying to get advice, trying to kind of get an insight from experts. And then 3 is starting from as early as possible to measure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, over to Rashid. So you have worked directly with social and green entrepreneurs, and you've kind of seen some of the challenges that they've had. You've witnessed their successes. You've witnessed what type of support is helpful. Through that experience, what's your insight in terms of where most social and green entrepreneurs need the most support? So what are some of the areas relating to business development where you feel that they need the most support in general?
So as we work with the entrepreneurs who are in the very early stage, probably in the idea stage of their journey, there are some common patterns that we see, and we believe there are a number of problems that they face, but there are critical few things that we believe if we can support, that we will have wide impact. The first thing is having them to walk through the measuring the right problem solution fit. Like there's a product market fit, but before that, as a social and green entrepreneur, he or she is actually solving a social or environmental problem. But when young founders come to us, there are a lot of enthusiasm and they try to solve all the problems with a very limited resources and with all the good intentions. So this is something we really work towards. Hey, what is the problem that we can solve together? This is the earliest stage. Okay, the vision is right there. What is the intensity of the problem and what is the frequency of the problem? So we try, where we help is that we try to have a very carve out a niche and give the proper support system in that area. This is one thing that I believe is very important. And another one related to this is, which today also covered, is the right vision and founder fit. Like having the right vision is very, very, very important. Like why I'm here to solve a social and environmental problem, answering this question, having a very good clarity to this question. I can't emphasize more on this. And trust me, they need organizations, they need some other person, some other like-minded people to have that right sort of discussion, so that the discussion is steered towards right direction. So related to this problem solution fit and vision founder fit, another important area is that I have seen majority of the social and green entrepreneurs, they to some extent dislike the word sales. They don't want to hear the salesmanship had. They believe I am a salesperson, I am a slimy salesperson who want to shovel down a product or service, that doesn't have any kind of demand. So we try to change that approach and give salespersonship a very noble approach. Like, when I am selling something, it means I'm solving a problem. And obviously, I'm solving a burning problem that not other companies, organizations are able to solve, or I am able to solve in a better manner. So the question that I ask, the solution that you are providing, is it better, faster, and cheaper when you roll out the service and product in the market? The question, the honest answer to this question is very important. And the third thing is that they do very good market research, like talking to the customers and everything. But let's say if someone is dealing with a sanitation problem in a rural area, and they have got an idea and they want to start it, where they get overwhelmed is that probably government has already taken some initiative to solve that problem, but they are not able to do it in a proper manner. The support that we see is very helpful for them. We do the secondary research from them, like in our website and in our other material. We have done very extensive analysis of particular sectors. So whenever an entrepreneur comes to us, we are able to say, hey, let's say in the wash sector, these are the things that have been done from a government level, from an NGO level, or the private companies. So what we do is that save them probably some time so that they can focus on building the right product and service that customers will actually love while talking to the customers. So these are the few things I believe what I have seen it actually help the early stage impact entrepreneurs quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So there's three key things there again. I'm going to see if I've heard them correctly. So the first seemed to be around setting the right vision according to your problem that you're trying to solve and having the solution really flow from the core problem. So not getting distracted outside of that. The second one is relating to, oh gosh, what was the second one related to?
It's related to having the right set of vision.
Oh, it was mindset. That's it. I think sometimes, again, social and green entrepreneurs can struggle with this conflict between impact and profit and feel, like you say, sometimes quite uncomfortable when it comes to sales, and actually having that self-belief in what you're doing and the fact that through selling your product, you are creating that impact that you're kind of really driven by. And then third was by doing your research. So like you say, if there's already a government, if there's another organization that's done something, don't rewrite it, don't make the same mistakes that they did, know your competition, know what's already been done. So I think those are really, really excellent pieces of advice. Thank you, Rashid. Moving on to Ellen. So one of the things that we kind of know about social entrepreneurs, green entrepreneurs, is that often the most kind of effective leaders are ones that come from the communities that they are trying to serve. Often they are underserved when it comes to, opportunities provided to them. So I know that you've done some really interesting work, with diverse communities in Canada. For example, you've worked with some Indigenous communities. From your experience, what's missing in terms of kind of resources and support that's needed for high potential social and green entrepreneurs to be able to thrive, especially when they're perhaps, underrepresented or underserved in that way?
Yeah, and I think Amelia made the point as well, that, in many cases, those folks have kind of at the core of their business ideas already this social or green kind of motivation and focus. So what we've seen be really effective is a couple of things. One, I think entrepreneur support organizations being really honest about their strengths and the kind of capacity and skills that they can bring to supporting an entrepreneur, and then recognizing where they have some gaps. So, for example, in the case of working with Indigenous communities, recognizing that some of the entrepreneur support organizations didn't have the cultural competencies really to engage with those communities in the most kind of positive or beneficial way. So partnering with organizations that have that experience, skill set, expertise, partnering with the right people to actually deliver the programs. And through those partnerships, then being able to offer that kind of blended support. I think as well, partnering with organizations, you know, if you are an entrepreneur support organization, partnering with organizations that can provide wraparound supports, whether that be, you know, mental health supports, language and literacy skills that are going to help upskill around other kind of key areas alongside the business support that you're providing. And Amelia mentioned this as well, but you know, one of the things that we see is a big gap is not in necessarily the businesses that they're running, but it's the entrepreneur's ability to kind of wayfind and navigate systems, the systems of entrepreneurship, the systems of investment, and being able to access those systems. So as entrepreneur support organizations, being able to provide that accompaniment and kind of support with systems navigation, and really helping those entrepreneurs to access networks, opportunities that they might not have ever heard of because they're not using the same language, they're not identifying themselves in you know, as a social entrepreneur, for example. And you know, I think we really try to work with organizations who, as I mentioned, you know, support people from those communities to provide the support within the organization as well. So not always kind of bringing folks in from externally, but also trying to upskill from kind of within the organization and offer that support.
Nice, thanks, Ellen. Yeah, that's really interesting how important kind of connecting and collaborating with other organizations is, and knowing that you don't have all the expertise within your own organization, but that's fine. It's not necessarily about trying to gain that within your kind of internal workforce, but about making the right connections and how you can kind of work around systems and so on. I think that's really, really key. Okay, my next question is back to Sarwa. As a resident young entrepreneur, you mentioned that you'd had some kind of supporting mentorship that really helped you. I wanted to dig in a little bit more into kind of what support you've received, and it could be from anything, it could be from BIA, it could be anything else that you've received that's been particularly impactful for you, and just to hear a little bit about why you think that was.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So you know, about the mentorship, actually I have one of my mentors right here, Mr. Rashid. So actually he helped me throughout my entrepreneurship journey a lot, and also he connected me to other mentors in Bangladesh through B4B, and through them actually I got to learn the real that Rashid Bhai said, the sales feelings. Like I need to monetize my idea. I need to capitalize my idea, and I have to be profitable as well as make the impact. As I that was my first impression for my business, that I need to create impact in my area. And so that's the main thing that the mentorship from BIA and also from B4B helped me to shape my ideas.
Okay, good. It sounds like you've had some really excellent support. And how out of interest, how did you kind of come across Rashid? How did you come across B4B? Were you approached? Was it kind of just from your own initiative? How did you find that support?
Okay, so actually, I know Mr. Rashid from very early stage of my life. Actually, he was my school friend. We got to go to same school, so we were actually school friend. And then actually from different discussion over different discussions, we get to learn each other, and he actually tried to convince me to get the idea into B4B and to get the mentorship. to actually support my my entrepreneurship journey and support my idea better.
Nice, thank you. And I think that's such a kind of helpful and interesting insight to have, actually, that, you know, quite often having someone in your network, even if it's from, you know, someone that you have as a friend or from school or through your family that believes in you, is so key. Someone that you trust, that you can talk to and kind of, you know, just even bounce ideas off and share challenges with and so on is really key. So getting out there and talking about what you're doing from an early point makes a big difference. Moving back to Chudi. So Chudi, you have some incredible experience. You're very modest in your introduction, because I know that you've won all sorts of awards as like lawyer, being the lawyer of the year, as well as an impact investor. You're quite an incredible person. And I think, you know, bringing a lot of that expertise into this conversation is an amazing opportunity, really, for us when we're looking at social and green entrepreneurs specifically. You know, there can be challenges around how do you kind of legally like register your organization. It can be sort of all sorts of complexities when it comes to governance, as well as the finance and measuring the impact and so on. So my question to you, which might be slightly complex, but hopefully we can kind of gather something from it, is when it comes to financials, governance, and legal, so all of these different things that you consider when you're making your impact investment decisions, what are the three most important things that need to be in place in order for you to consider investing in them?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So that's what we essentially call investment readiness, to be honest. That's the term that, you know, encapsulates all of that. It's difficult to actually drive it down or narrow it down to 3 points, but I'll try. So the first thing which, you know, investors will look out for is what kind of business entity do you have, right? At the very basic, you know, level. What kind of company do you have? And again, that depends on what jurisdiction you actually operate in, right? What part of the world are you, and what is the most effective and efficient business entity that you can have? Of course, it's standard for you to have a company, right? It will take different forms in different parts of the world. So for example, in the US, you'll be talking about an LLC or a corporation, right? Of course, there are differences between an LLC and a corporation. And interestingly, I had a conversation with some of our investment managers in the office today, trying to explain why perhaps it might be best for companies to have a corporation rather than an LLC, especially when you're looking to scale and you want to be attractive to investors who at some point use sophisticated investment instruments, right? If you just have an entity in a local jurisdiction, you probably need to check what kind of entity works best. Again, it should be a company, because a company has a separate legal personality from the owners. At the very basic level, you should have that kind of entity set up. The next thing we look out for is, do you have the necessary permits, licenses to operate in that jurisdiction, right? No matter how beautiful, no matter how interesting, you know, your idea is, your product is, if you do not operate within the confines of the law, right? If you do not have the right permits, the right licenses to operate within that jurisdiction, all the jurisdictions, you run foul of the law, and all that you've worked for over the years, right, would fall like a pack of cards. So at the very basic level, you should have that as well, right, from a legal point of view. Then in terms of, you know, governance, right, we also look to how have you structured that entity in terms of its decision-making process, in terms of operations. How have you staffed, you know, that organization? Who are the people in that organization? Do they have employment contracts? What are the terms of employment for those people? Do you have a board of directors? Do you have a board of advisors? You know, what's the makeup of your board? And increasingly, you know, every investor is looking for a board, or, you know, a group of officers where there's diversification, right? What sort of gender balance do you have at that level, even across the organization, right? So these are some of the things that we look out for, before investing. So these are some of the things you have to pay attention to, right? Beyond that, in terms of financials, for companies that have been in existence for a while, let's say 2 to 3 years, right? Of course, you must have your books in order, right? And that's a no-brainer. So have your books in order in terms of your figures, have your books in order in terms of measuring impacts that you've made so far. At the very basic level, it doesn't have to be anything too sophisticated, right? But something that gives an indication of one traction, both in terms of your finance and traction in terms of your impact, right? So those are some of the key things that we look out for. And increasingly, right, we like to see a team that has someone who is very good with finance, as well as someone who has the sales skill set that we've talked about, right? Because the reality is that you're running a business irrespective of the impact, right? So you should be able to sell whatever products that you have, right? Because ultimately, that success in terms of selling that product or service helps to, make that impact last longer, reach more people, so those are very important things. And then having a finance manager, because the reality is that the more money we pump into these enterprises, right, the more accountable you have to be, right? And a lot of times you cannot be the visionary, right? And then be the same person who is looking out for the books, making sure that every penny is spent right. Of course, you have that responsibility at a very high level, but then you need someone who has that expertise as you scale. And then for more sophisticated startups, right? Increasingly, we look at startups who have a little bit more complicated corporate structure, right? So we notice that a lot of the investments that come into most of the startups come from North America, for example. So we like to have startups. So speaking from the African perspective, we like to have startups who have holding companies domiciled in the United States, right? So you have the holding company, probably a Delaware corporation, that then holds all of the shares subject to applicable laws, right, in each of the operating entities that you have across Africa. So what that does is that it centralizes all your investments at the holdco level, right? And it's more attractive for institutional investors to come in at the holdco level and in a jurisdiction where they're more familiar with laws, familiar with the corporate governance requirements, and then there are, tighter measures that make these investors very comfortable. So, just in a nutshell, that sort of summarizes what we would say it means you are investment ready to a large extent, right?
Yeah, thank you. And obviously a lot in there. So I think gives a little insight into kind of the complexity, especially when it comes to being an effective social and green entrepreneur. And obviously a lot of what you're saying is kind of a bit more relevant to enterprises that are a bit more advanced, but helpful for entrepreneurs even just starting out to kind of have an awareness of this so that they can work towards it and keep it in mind. And hopefully people have been able to kind of take some notes, but we're going to be putting the recording of these sessions up on a shared platform, so you will be able to kind of listen back as well. So again, by the time an organization is ready for that type of investment, they are quite far down the line. But some organizations, in order to get to that point, will need financial support in the interim. And I know that, for example, SOMO provides microfinance support to social and green entrepreneurs. And I wondered, Amelia, whether given your experience of providing finance to earlier stage enterprises, you could share any kind of major lessons learned when it comes to sort of doing this effectively, through that experience.
Yeah, definitely. So there's obviously a huge financing gap that exists between your microfinance, which often is just way too low amounts to really successfully start a business, really difficult terms to be able to have the flexibility needed to launch a business successfully. And then kind of the gap goes until you're then trying to access financing of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And most businesses don't need that to start, and also don't have the necessary requirement to be able to access that type of financing. And so to get businesses off the ground or to a place that they are sustainable and can actually provide some of this meaningful employment and social impact, there's a huge gap in the financing options that exist. So as SOMO, we provide non-commercial financing options in a few different forms. Most of what we provide is low interest debt, and we work with a bunch of partners to be able to provide this capital to entrepreneurs in a flexible way. And how we do this is we start from the initial stage that where a business comes into our programs. We start collecting data on them to understand that business, to understand that entrepreneur, and be able to allocate capital effectively over time. So right now, our entrepreneurs are able to access between about $500 and about $25,000 through different funds we manage, and different stages of their growth. And throughout this whole period, we're collecting data, real-time financial data and quarterly impact data through a reporting tool called DigiKua that uses WhatsApp and USSD to collect that data and generate financial documents for our businesses, as well as build out a profile for them on our investment dashboard, and allow us to be able to use that data to generate basically our alternative credit score that we use internally to determine which businesses will receive additional capital and other types of support over time.
Nice, thank you, Amelia. Really great answer, and efficient as well. So I'm going to ask, I think, just two more questions before we jump into our breakout session. I'll ask the speakers if you can try and keep your response, just for the interest of time, to kind of about a minute and a half. That would be amazing. Little challenge. But I do want to ask Anna, when it comes to social and green entrepreneurs kind of effectively communicating their impact, storytelling plays a big part in that. Do you have any advice around how to do that effectively? And do you have any examples of a social or green enterprise that you have come across that you think does it particularly well, that we could sort of learn from?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one big part of knowing your impact, besides internally, right, to understand what are you doing well, what are you supposed to change and adapt, how can you achieve the most impact, right? For me, the second important part is communicating, right? Because we see, and I see especially a lot of businesses that claim to have social impact and have no kind of background to prove it, which always makes people suspicious and makes people doubt in the actual like impact making of these ventures, right? So I think it's very important to be very transparent about what are you doing, how are you measuring your impact, and how, based on what are you making this claim that you are changing something in the society or the environment, right? So I think it's very important for the credibility, right, on one hand, and then also for a few other things, such as the fundraising, investment gathering for your funders, for your other stakeholders, right, to evaluate the impact. And then in the end, it's also very relevant for attracting beneficiaries or clients or whatever your model is in the end, right? Because, you know, why would I want to join or take up your service if I don't believe in its effectiveness, right? So I think there are many, many important reasons why communicating impact there is. And different ways to do it, right? I mean, through a lot of branding and communications, this is one side. I know a lot of organizations, especially social and green businesses, publish their yearly impact reports to a degree, or overall yearly or 3-yearly reports. This can be a very valuable tool, and I can really encourage to, you know, look into some good examples. I can share a few links in the chat of, for example, some ventures that I found are working interesting. For example, Chiquitas, based in Czech Republic, who works on supporting women in getting into the IT field. They published a very nice yearly report where they explain how do they measure their impact, what were their goals, what did they achieve, what is their financial return, what is their impact return, and so on, right? We have
Nice.
an example from Austria, Vienna Hobby Lobby, that also publishes their annual report, and they can be checked out. You have big kind of social entrepreneurship support organizations such as ours, but also, for example, Impact Hub Network, that also publish their yearly results on how are they making the impact, right? So this is definitely can be seen as an example. And then you can play around with it a lot. For example, we use it a lot. We are a non-profit organization, non-governmental one, so we do a lot of fundraising, like talking to partners and so on. We include these data in our fundraising materials, right? So use it also to help your case when you are talking to some potential funders, right? Because it's quite relevant, as we heard also from Judy, that this kind of is what they are looking into, right? Are you really making the claim, achieving the claim that you're saying you are?
Nice. Thank
so
you.
yeah, I'm going to share the links in the chat. And,
Great, thank you. And yeah, I think sometimes when you see social enterprises that, you know, tell the story within their brand, even to customers, I think that's super inspiring, and tend to be the ones that do that effectively. I think for the interest of time, we're going to have to jump into the breakout sessions. I could continue this conversation for a lot longer. So apologies for having to cut it a little shorter, but what we're going to do is have everybody break into 3 rooms, and it's quite simple. I just want you to discuss one question, and I'm going to put that up on the screen now. Okay, so the question that I'd love you to discuss is, can you all see this? Yeah, okay. So when you think of the gaps that exist in business development support for social and green entrepreneurs, what do you think is most needed? And specifically, what can a convener like YBI do to support? So we're in a unique position where we work with all of these amazing organizations around the world, providing different types of support, who have access to really kind of great, diverse social and green entrepreneurs, and we can bring in different kind of stakeholder representatives from impact investors and so on. So with this all in mind, I'd love you just to, until 20 past, to discuss what you think is most needed, where there are current gaps of support, and what YBI or conveners like YBI do to add real value. So you're going to be placed into a room now. We haven't got long. We've only got about probably 10 minutes or so, or 12 minutes. But yes, if you could have that discussion, we'll then come back at 20 past, very briefly feedback some of the insights that have been captured, and then we'll close for past. So I will see you back in this main room at 20 past. Okay, we'll just wait for the other groups to come back in. Okay, hello everyone. Great to see you all back. Okay, so let's just start feeding back. I think there were 3 groups. So I'm happy to sort of feedback some of the key insights from our group. I think if we just try and keep it to 2 minutes each, then we should have enough time to do this and then close. Okay, so some of the key challenges that were raised relating to kind of business development and entrepreneurs being able to continue to thrive from our group was around being able to communicate their work in such a way that investors or other stakeholders they're trying to bring on board to support can understand. So really communicating what they do in the language that those people understand. It's obviously key when it comes to accessing investment, you know, whether it's getting support from government or whatever that might be. So communication piece. And yeah, that was actually, I think, the core one that came up. In terms of where YBI can support, one was around really kind of gathering all of the knowledge that we have access to when it comes to different types of business models that young social and green entrepreneurs are developing that are working well. gathering that knowledge and really sharing it back, and also looking at different fundraising strategies. So obviously we have this wealth of entrepreneurs and members where we can kind of capture a lot of learning from and disseminate it. Another really great piece of advice was around YBI being able to provide a support journey or structure, so that when an entrepreneur, for example, is just starting out and then they graduate from a particular type of support and then they're looking for the next stage of investment, perhaps, they have a sense of where they can go to and what types of, what roadmap of support might be accessible to them. And this could look at kind of a relatively localized regional kind of perspective, but then also providing more of a global angle as well. So basically, again, capturing the learning that we have from our networks and our knowledge to provide that roadmap, or that kind of information about the roadmap. And then finally, getting basically entrepreneurs to be able to learn a lot from each other, especially when they're just starting out, providing more types of webinars like this, where people can gain insights and advice, and so on. So yeah, that was just very briefly what we captured in our group. So I think, Vicky, you were also capturing some notes from your group. So I'll hand over to you.
Everyone, yes, so in our group, there were some similar themes, actually. We were talking about before startup stage, the barriers for young people, and Rachel was sharing within the university context, like barriers for students interested in social or green entrepreneurship, that actually what they want to do is have some sorts of real life work experience and internships, and be able to speak to young entrepreneurs. And then Sawa also shared from his perspective as a young social and green entrepreneur that he really values as well, that peer-to-peer learning. And is there something that YBI can do with its network of members to facilitate that connection between the young entrepreneurs themselves? They could be in different countries, in different sectors, or it could be in a more local sense. But everyone seemed to agree that internships and peer-to-peer learning was something that would really benefit. And also we were then talking about, are there digital solutions to that? And, Dayan with his creative mind was starting to think of ways that we could support.
Nice, great, thank you, Vicky. And Daniela, I think, was facilitating the last group.
Yeah, thanks. I think we had some similar themes across the groups. We sort of in the focus on existing gaps, access to finance was a prominent part of the discussion in our breakout room, and sort of the need for social and green entrepreneurs to potentially be looking at different ways of financing their business models, especially if they're looking at different sort of segments of the market, different customers needing different materials or technologies. And we sort of had a more detailed discussion about sort of how to address some of these gaps in funding, and where there can be sort of a bundling of both training and financial support to make sure that it's, there's not just sort of a cliff edge after a training, but something when we're talking about looking at fit of investment and different financial products and access to capital for entrepreneurs, that they have that they're investment ready. I think I'm stealing your word here, Chudi, and ready to go for those sort of investments. And really talking about the sort of other aspects that can support this, like non-financial resources, and sort of the length of time of support across these different areas, and whether sort of programming is sort of running at a sufficient pace, like is it 6 months, or I think Ellen, you showed an example of one of the programs that runs for up to sort of 3 years of one-to-one coaching, so that was brilliant. We also touched on communication from a slightly different angle, looking at sort of creating an environment where information is shared, so entrepreneurs sort of have access and knowledge of information, and also touched on the importance of peer support, and how entrepreneurs can motivate one another. And then finally sort of ended talking about the importance of representation and visibility around different sort of diverse models, especially looking at social and green, and sort of where it's important to sort of diversify beyond just sort of Western centric business models, and sort of a potential role for YBI there to share and to learn and share and increase visibility.
Amazing. Oh, I feel proud. It's great. Obviously, we're just, you know, there's so much here and we're just kind of starting to dig into some of it. It's just like an initial kind of insight snapshot into all of these different things we could go into much further depth into. But thank you so much everyone for taking part in the discussion and gathering your insights. And it is just the beginning of the conversation. We'll definitely be kind of building on this. As I mentioned, the next session takes place next Tuesday, which will focus on ecosystem building and also kind of really joining up a lot of these support systems better. So I think follows quite nicely on from what a lot of has been raised today in terms of, you know, gathering insights, connecting, sharing information and so on. So yeah, please do come along to that. I think Carol is just going to share a quick poll before we close, just to gather some quick insight from you about today's session. If you could just, yeah, fill that out, that would be great. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much again. Thank you in particular to our speakers for sharing your wonderful expertise, and to everyone else for attending, and do keep talking to each other, connecting. Come along next Tuesday, and again, we will share the recording of this as well, so you can look back. Okay, have a great rest of the day, everyone, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.